Today on the Bourbon Bytes Podcast, I'm sharing the latest and greatest whiskey and video game news, including new releases from Heaven Hill, the 2026 edition of Bourye, an all-new build-your-own bourbon trail experience launching in Kentucky, and a bite-sized review of Nulu Blue Agave Spirit. Can Kentucky make better tequila than Mexico? We'll find out. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Bourbon Bytes Podcast. I'm your host, Clifton, and welcome to the week of Thursday, March 5th, 2026. You may have noticed that I did not have an episode last week. I unfortunately came down with a really bad case of the flu, and I went to go record, and my voice was just so nasty, and I figured you guys didn't want to hear that, so I decided to hold off and then record that review this week. So thank you for your patience, but I do have an amazing review in store today, thanks to one of my Byte Club members. We're going to get to that a bit, but we do have some whiskey and video game news that I've been sitting on for a couple weeks now, and I got to share it with you guys, or else it's going to be old news if I don't hurry up and tell you. So here's what you need to know in the world of whiskey and video games this week. This past Sunday, Bourye just came back to the High West distillery. Remember Bourye was like a distillery exclusive thing like 2 years ago, and then I somehow randomly found it in the wild last year. I don't know if it's back to distillery exclusive or if it's still going to be considered a limited release, but it's back for the year, and they're coming back with a new 101 proof version. Now, as with all Bourye releases, this is a blend of bourbon and rye whiskey, but the 2026 release is made up of at least 10-year-old bourbon and rye whiskeys. So the range is 10 to 19 years old, which is pretty exciting. I love when these blends have older whiskeys in it, and then having up to 19-year-old distillate in there makes me really excited. Most likely that's going to be sourced from somewhere like MGP, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be a great whiskey. So this email doesn't necessarily say it to come back to being a distillery exclusive. It does say that it's available to purchase at the distillery and their general stores, but there's no info about where it's going to be available other than that. Pricing on it's going to be $125, which is up a little bit. I think it was closer to $100 last year. But with there being a 10-year minimum age statement on it, I think it's a little more justified. So I'm definitely going to seek out another bottle of it. I did enjoy the 2025 release, but this release, being 10 years old minimum, is going to be a really, really cool one to get my hands on if I can. So I'll let you guys know if I see that start popping up here in Southern California, but I'm very interested in getting my hands on this bottle yet again. Well, staying on the train of new releases, we actually have two from Heaven Hill. So they just announced their 2026 Heaven Hill Heritage Collection release. This is a 22-year-old Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. This is the oldest one since the series debuted in 2022, and this uses their classic mash bill of 78% corn, 10% rye, and 12% malted barley, and it's going to be bottled at barrel proof and non-chill filtered. So these barrels were filled back in 2003, and it was bottled at the end of December last year. Unfortunately, the only one of these I've had a chance to try was their 19-year corn whiskey, so I haven't had a chance to try Heaven Hill bourbon at that high of an age statement, but it sounds like it's going to be an incredible release. It's going to be $319 MSRP. And it's going to be launching nationally, of course, in limited quantities. Now, if you go to events that Heaven Hill happens to sponsor, like the New Orleans Bourbon Festival, they usually have their Heritage Series release available for those that have the early entry VIP to the grand tasting. I know that because that's when I tried the 19-year corn whiskey from them. Unfortunately, I'm not going to the New Orleans Bourbon Festival this year, but if you are, try to get in on that and see if you can try that 22-year-old Heaven Hill, because that sounds like an incredible pour. And for $319, I think that's a very fair price for a very hyper-aged exclusive bourbon from Heaven Hill. I mean, that's up there in age with the Pappy Van Winkle releases, which go for much, much more. So I know there's probably a little bit of a secondary market on Heaven Hill products, but typically a bit less than, of course, Buffalo Trace and other brands like that. So if you get a chance to buy this at retail or near retail, let me know how it is. Well, we are not done with new whiskey releases from Heaven Hill. They also announced their 20-year celebration with a new Bernheim 20th anniversary release. This is a 10-year-old small batch version of Bernheim wheat whiskey, which debuted 20 years ago, and it's going to be priced at $84.99. This just debuted last week, so it should be hitting the market here soon. Now, there's a throwback quote from 2005 when Bernheim was originally released. It says, "The first truly new American whiskey style introduced since Prohibition, due to its use of soft winter wheat as the primary grain." I just think wheat whiskey is such a niche category, and getting it at an older age would be really interesting to see because I don't think the Bernheim barrel proof releases that have come in the past are that old. As far as I'm aware, they're around the same age as Larceny, which is like 6 to 8 years old. So I would be definitely willing to give a try to an older wheat whiskey, see if it impacts some more unique character, because a lot of time wheat whiskey has kind of been described as the softest whiskey. So maybe with some age, it can really highlight what makes it unique from corn or rye whiskey or even single malt whiskey. I think it's a beautiful bottle. It's a fun release. I think $85 is a bit up there for a 10-year-old release. I mean, I'm just thinking that's more than Elijah Craig barrel proof, which is typically 12 years old. So I don't know how well that's going to do, but I'm looking forward to at least seeing what people think about it and seeing if it's worth picking up, because the Bernheim barrel proofs for me have been interesting, but not interesting enough to get a second bottle of. So, but yeah, cool to see new products coming from Heaven Hill. And there's one more whiskey I want to give a shout out to. This is actually a returning whiskey. The Sagamore 10-year-old rye whiskey is making a return to the market. I remember when this came out a few years ago, I never had a chance to pick it up and try it, but I'm so glad to see that it's coming back to store shelves this year. This Sagamore is aged for at least 10 years in new charred American white oak barrels and then matured and thoughtfully blended to honor the legacy of Maryland-style distilling. I know we got some big Sagamore fans in the audience here, and I'm really excited to see this one make a return. Now, it looks like it's going to be available across the country. It lists Total Wine, actually, as a retailer that carries it. I see that they have it in stock at my local Total Wine. So if you guys want to hear my thoughts on the Sagamore 10-year-old rye whiskey, let me know. I'll definitely pick up a bottle and give it a review. It's $80 for a 10-year-old rye whiskey. I think it's a very, very fair price. 55.4% ABV. So if you guys want to hear my thoughts on the returning Sagamore 10, just let me know. Leave a comment on this podcast episode, whether you're watching it on YouTube, or visit our Whiskey and Gaming Lounge Discord server at bourbonbytes.com and let me know you want to see my thoughts on this bottle. All right, well, moving on from new whiskeys and talking about new experiences, one of which is coming to us from the Kentucky Distillers Association, and they're announcing their Build Your Own Bourbon Trail feature at kybourbontrail.com. So this is really cool. It lets you do a customized experience and itinerary for your upcoming Bourbon Trail experience. I know when I planned my bourbon trip back in 2019, I had to do a lot of heavy lifting myself, just doing research, looking up opening hours, finding where I wanted to go along the trail. Well, now they make it so much easier to do just by visiting their website. They list out all of the different distilleries that are part of the Bourbon Trail. You can take a quick view at their hours, their address, their amenities, the nearby distilleries, and really build your perfect bourbon trail. We know you can't do it all in one day, let alone 2 or 3 days, but you can definitely make the most of your trip with some planning. So as someone that loves to plan travel, I love this new feature. I've just been playing around with it earlier today. It also lets you share your trip with your friends. So if you have a group going to Kentucky together, you guys can plan together and share your dream itinerary right through the website. They say they've been planning this release for a year now, and they have a video up on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail YouTube channel that kind of goes over the features of this website. But you can build it by day, by location, by region. You can pick the type of classes and experiences you want to have at each location. Now, this doesn't actually reserve the tours. You still have to go make those reservations yourself with the individual distilleries, but you can see the available times for them. Just kind of get your overall itinerary set up. Then you can book your trip. Always remember to book your reservations early because they do tend to sell out at the individual distilleries. But yeah, I love seeing new ways that tech is being used in the bourbon industry, and having a trip planner is just such a fun thing to do. Even if you don't have a trip planned soon, it's still fun to kind of make a dream trip for maybe future travel. Now, also talking about experiences, Lux Row is opening invitations to their VIP experience called The Front Row. They introduced this back in 2024, and they say that they are the first Kentucky distillery to envision an exclusive community membership and established The Front Row to offer members special firsthand experiences all year long. I don't live close enough to Kentucky to really benefit from something like this, but if you are in the area, you get access to some things like, for example, 20% off their merchandise. You get access to all-inclusive members-only distillery events, complimentary distillery tour tickets, and exclusive on-site VIP member benefits, plus access to their most rare and sought-after releases. So if you are a super fan of a brand, check to see if they have a whiskey club like this. They do cost money to join, but if you are buying from them anyways and you're visiting them anyways, it probably pays for itself just in the access that you get. So like I said, memberships are now open. You can go to frontrow.vip to learn more about this experience. All right, well, that does it for this week's whiskey news. We do have one piece of video game news that I wanted to share with you guys because it warms my heart. There is a new generation of Pokémon coming out. It was just announced this week. It's called Pokémon Winds and Pokémon Waves, and they're going to be an exclusive to the Nintendo Switch 2 platform. Now, the reveal trailer is really cool. You don't see any new Pokemon other than the new starters, but you get introduced to this really beautiful world. It's clearly based off of like Southeast Asia, like the islands, Indonesia, things like that. There's also 2 new special editions of Pikachu, Mr. Windy Chew and Miss Wavy Chew, wearing their little sundresses and their tourist gear. It's really, really cute. Now, we don't know much about this game other than we have a sneak peek at the new trainers as well as the 3 new starter Pokemon. And I gotta say, I already got a favorite. So with this 10th generation of Pokemon, you get 3 starters, of course, a grass type, a water type, and a fire type. The grass type is Brout, which is a cute little bird Pokemon. It's like a little chick. The fire type is a puppy Pokemon called Pombon. And yes, he looks like a Pomeranian. I love him. He's gonna be mine no matter what. And if you prefer a water type, there is a new water gecko Pokemon, Gekwa, which I love the name, might be the partner for you. So check out the reveal trailer. These new starters obviously seem inspired by previous Pokemon. They don't look totally unique, but I gotta say, a Pomeranian-based starter. I mean, I didn't think you'd get any cuter than Charmander, but make it a puppy and I'm sold. Like I said, not too much is revealed about these games, but I'm going to keep an eye on it because, I don't know, I love the region, I love the vibes, the tropical aspect of the game. This will definitely be one I pick up for Switch 2 once it comes out. All right, well, that does it for this week's news. Now, I do have a really different type of review today because I'm not reviewing a whiskey at all, but it's very much whiskey inspired. You'll find out shortly. Let's get into our bite-sized review. All right, well, first of all, I want to give a huge shout out to Bourbon Gigabyte member Tony Bag of Donuts, who provide this sample for review. Now, this actually isn't my first time having this. I actually had this with Tony while I was visiting Kentucky with its bourbon night towards the end of last year. We got an Airbnb, we were roommates, and Tony was intrigued by this bottle of Nulu Blue Agave Spirit. Yes, we're talking about Nulu from Prohibition Craft Spirits. They have a line of blue agave spirit that has been finished in Kentucky bourbon barrels. Now, it turns out this isn't new for them. They've been partnered with a chain of Mexican restaurants called El Nopal that's based in the Kentucky area, and they've been making a reposado agave spirit for them for a while. We had a chance to try this at the distillery as well. It has the El Nopal logo with the cactus at the top, and it says Azul Reposado. No branding of Nulu whatsoever on this release. Here's the weird thing, right? You can't technically call it tequila, but this is like a weird one because I almost feel like they could. So what they're doing is they are actually sourcing the agave spirit from Tequila, Mexico. So it's actually being made in tequila, which means it should qualify as a tequila, but they are moving it across state lines and then aging it or finishing it in bourbon barrels. So it's a gray area with the TTB. I know the tequila region of Mexico is very protective of the name tequila. I mean, that's why mezcal is basically the same thing. It's just the tequila that's been made in regions other than tequila. You can't call it tequila. You have to call it mezcal. But then it gets even more complicated because you're going into the U.S. So I think they've just decided to play it safe and just call it a agave spirit. So like I said, there's the El Nopal Azul Reposado agave spirit that they make for this restaurant, and you can buy the bottles of it. But in addition to that, they've had some special limited release single barrels. So what we're drinking right now is the one, it's a Nulu label. It looks just like the Nulu bourbon, but it says Blue Agave Spirit finished in Kentucky bourbon barrels. So they're considering this an extra Añejo release because it's aged for 4+ years in those Kentucky bourbon barrels. This one also comes in at 55.4% ABV. So we're getting a 110.8 proof blue agave spirit aged for 4 years in bourbon barrels. I'm very excited to see how this does. I had a chance to try it at the distillery, and I remember thinking it was one of the most interesting tasting agave spirits I've ever had. But of course, I had been drinking a lot of bourbon. We had just done a barrel pick. So I'm excited to try this on a bit of a neutral palate. Now, I don't remember exact price of this bottle. I know that the seal box one, they have it for $130. That sounds about right. So Tony, feel free to comment on this, how much you paid. But I think it was right around that price point, if I remember correctly. All right, so I've got it in my glass now, and when I tell you this looks like a bourbon, I mean, it looks like a bourbon. This has some beautiful color on it. I mean, what you would expect from a 4-year-old Kentucky bourbon, which is so interesting. I mean, I think this brings up a great conversation. I've heard recently that tequila is the fastest growing premium spirits market in the U.S. Bottles from $50 to $100 are kind of becoming the norm versus the cheap, crappy tequila that people have been buying for years and years and years. People are really seeing the art of premium agave spirits. And I think this is an interesting take, this is a Kentucky take on agave spirits. Can Kentucky make a better agave spirit than Mexico? I mean, you never know, but I will say, of course, this is made and crafted in Mexico, so I don't want that to be, confusing. However, it was aged entirely in Kentucky, in the Kentucky climate, in those Kentucky bourbon barrels. So it makes you wonder, is this blend or is this mashup something that the bourbon and or premium tequila market want? Well, let's give it a nose. Oh, wow. That's so interesting. It's very much like a caramelized woody sugar. Like if you made like a rock candy, but it was like wood barrel flavored, it has a really just sweet, dense oakiness about it on the nose. Whoa, that's very different than any bourbon I've ever had. Bourbon with the sweetness, you're getting more of the corn sweetness. This one is just an inherent like sweetness, but it's rounded out by a really brilliant oaky note. Yeah, the nose is like the crust of a creme brulee, just that bright sugar, a little bit of toastiness, and man, it's so inviting. I can't wait to take a sip. So let's do it. Cheers. Oh yeah, still very sweet. It almost reads like a rum territory in the amount of sweetness here. Not to the point where it feels like there's been sugar added. I just think that's how those sugars have really wrapped themselves around that, the oak in the wooden barrel. You do get some of those agave forward notes beyond just the agave sweetness. You get the little bit of black pepper, which is something I love on a tequila. Usually it's harder to find with a reposado or an extra añejo. Usually that's why I like just pure blanco tequilas, because I really like that spicy black pepper or even white pepper note. But this has been rounded out beautifully by that oak. I think I see why people like Tony fall in love with this. It is such a smooth, easy drinking spirit. Even though it's at the 110.8 proof, doesn't drink it at all. It has a really nice mouthfeel and viscosity. It doesn't necessarily taste like a whiskey. Like, I don't think I would be easily confused that this is a whiskey. I don't think I would know what this is, honestly. I think I have to dig deep to find some of those more agave forward notes, which I kind of hoped that it would be a little bit more obviously agave. I think maybe it's just been mellowed out so much by that 4 years in oak that you kind of lose some of those nuances. Needless to say, it's obviously good spirit. It's just not the spicy kind that I'm looking for normally when I'm searching for an agave spirit. Which I don't think you would want that if you're going for a barrel age, extra añejo. You're going to want that to be a smoother, easier sip. So in terms of score, I have to consider things like Don Julio 1942, which is one of the best sipping tequilas I've ever had. I haven't had too many at the higher end range. I usually, like I said, I'll go for more of a Blanco versus like an extra añejo or a reposado. But I have had Don Julio 1942, and that one's coming in at $140. So we're within $10 of each other. And that's one of the most highly rated, at least for consumers, maybe not tequila experts, tequilas out there. And when I think back to having the 1942 and this one, I see a lot of similarities here. So that all being said, I think this is a really great sipping tequila. And I think when you compare it to things like that, I think it's very much justifies the price. Not necessarily something that I'm going to go buy and, go out of my way to get a bottle of, just like I don't have a bottle of Don Julio 1942. But in terms of score, yeah, for an agave spirit, I'm going to have to give that an 8.5 out of 10. I do really like it. I just wish it gave a little bit more of those particularly unique agave characters, but they're not necessarily trying to do that here. They're trying to make a Kentucky bourbon-inspired spirit, and I think what they've created here is fabulous. I wouldn't change anything about it. Maybe change the source agave spirit they're putting in here, just so I can get something a little bit more mineral, a little more of the earth, which is, where I gravitate towards, mostly towards mezcals versus tequilas. But again, I don't know if I'm the target audience for this. I think I am somewhat, because I do appreciate tequila and agave spirits, and I love bourbon, so why wouldn't I love this? I think I just would rather have them on their own. That's kind of how I felt about getting into scotch. When people were first getting me into scotch, they're saying, oh, try this scotch, it tastes a lot like bourbon. But I don't want my scotch to taste like bourbon. I want my scotch to taste like scotch. And I think that's what's happening here. I think this is a delicious product. Yes, I sound like the CEO of McDonald's right now. But I think this is a delicious pour. It's just not something that I'm going to gravitate towards. But that doesn't knock the fact that it is an exceptional product. So 8.5 out of 10, I think, is a fair rating. Let me know what you guys think if you've had a chance to try this. It's such a unique one, such a fun one. Never had I thought that I'd review an agave spirit aged in bourbon barrels, aged in Kentucky here on the channel. But here we are, thanks to Tony. All right, well, that does it for this week's episode. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to hit the thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube, or hit the like button on your favorite podcast platform. Make sure to follow me. I'm here pretty much every Thursday morning, unless I'm sick, like last week. Until then, I'll be over on YouTube, youtube.com/Bourbon Bytes, with a live stream this Thursday. This has been the Bourbon Bytes Podcast, a whiskey podcast with a gaming twist. Cheers, and I'll talk to you next episode.